Next up, I am pleased to introduce David Swanson. David is an anti-war activist, journalist, radio host, and author. He is also the executive director of World Beyond War and a campaign coordinator for Roots Action. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Emily. What a powerful story we just heard, and we should remember that Guantanamo is going strong, no matter what wars they claim to have ended. Thank you for including me with all of these wonderful people. Matt Ho said he wanted to belong to something. I am very glad to belong with all of you, everyone speaking and not speaking here. I think Matt knows too that he belongs to something better now. I'm going to try to share my screen and see if it works. I hope you're seeing a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through really fast here. See if I can get to the next screen. So just a basic overview of what we've been through. We're looking at, despite all the focus on the horrors of that one day 20 years ago, and all the focus on the ending of a war as itself supposedly a catastrophe, the wars of the 20 years, we're looking at millions dead, injured, traumatized, homeless, the rule of law eroded, not just in certain spots, but around the world. The natural environment devastated, government secrecy and surveillance and authoritarianism increased worldwide, the right to protest constrained, the wars for freedom, and we're not getting our freedoms back with the ending of the wars for freedom. Terrorism increased, not eliminated, not decreased, increased worldwide. Weapons sales increased worldwide. Racism and bigotry spread far and wide. Trillions and trillions of dollars wasted that could have done a world of good. Wealth transferred upward to a handful of profiteers. A culture corroded, a drug epidemic generated in the United States, a disease pandemic made easier to spread. And the US military turned into such a machine of one-sided slaughter that its casualties, despite being 98% of the media coverage, are less than 1% of those in these wars. And the top cause of death in the US military is suicide. On the other hand, we, opponents of this madness, leave behind in these 20 years a number of additional wars prevented, wars ended, bases stopped, weapons deals stopped, money divested from weapons, police demilitarized, people educated, ourselves educated, and the tools to carry all of this further, as we must do, developed. These wars that have used the excuse of war on terror have been in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Philippines, and additional military actions that they don't call wars in a dozen more countries listed on this slide. And then dozens of attempted coups, despite the endless wars on top of that. The dead, there ought to be a serious scientific study and survey. Now, if you're going to justify these wars as somehow doing more good than harm, you have to know what the harm is. The best evidence we have suggests a couple of million dead in Iraq, over 1 million dead in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a total of almost 7 million dead, and then 7,000 US troops on top of that. You're looking at one-sided slaughters, and nobody's being told that. And those envying the dead, of course, the much greater numbers, bigger than 6 or 7 million, many millions of people injured, traumatized, made homeless, lives ruined. Financial costs for everybody but a handful of lucky, short-sighted profiteers include the direct cost of the militarism, also the lost opportunities, the destruction, the future healthcare costs, the transfer of wealth to the wealthy, and the ongoing cost of the military budget that is increasing despite a war ending. Between 2001 and 2020, with numbers from SIPRI, you're looking at the US military alone spending this amount of money. These are hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
Thank you, David. Just wonderful to see the juxtaposition between what, and for you to break it down for us, what the difference between what we spend it on and what we could have and what we lost also. We here in LA, with so much pollution and concentration on switching to clean energy, we have what's called a just transition campaign. And we need to just transition from war. Our entire economy needs to be decoupled from the war economy. So much fascinating jobs, so much fascinating work for people, for youth. Earlier in the program, I talked about Los Angeles and all the challenges we're going through. Imagine if instead of having one of the seats of military industrial complex in Los Angeles, if all of that tens of billions of dollars were turned over into the rescuing of the greater Los Angeles area, and all that could be done and how interesting it could be for people. Just in the LA Times today or yesterday was an article bemoaning the fact that workers don't want to go back to work, and people are realizing it's not just pay, it's that the work that American workers have been asked to do for decades has been brainless, but also horrific. Imagine if we were called to action for something much more beautiful. We have the money. You've just shown us that we have.